Hello, everybody. Hello. Not many of you, so let's hear you say hello back. Yay! So welcome to Women of the World Festival Cardiff, first time that we've done it here. So that's really, really exciting. Obviously, you may or may not know that this is a massive festival in the South Bank Centre in London, and of course it's International Women's Day. I guess because you're here, you know that. But we're here to celebrate, basically, achievements of women, and we've got some extraordinary people here to talk to you today, women here to talk to you. I'm one of them. I'll take extraordinary out of that list in an apologetic fashion. Yeah, so I'll begin, and then we'll move on to hearing from Joy and Christine and Uzo. So, yeah, hi. My name's Alex Murdoch, and I'm a theatre maker. And I also run a theatre company called Cartoon de Salvo. So about a year or so ago, I found myself in a sort of marriage guidance situation with the guy that I started my theatre company with, Brian Logan. We were sitting opposite a business psychologist called Liz Margery. Hi, do come in and sit down. That's fine. And Liz Margery had come to work with us on organisation development. And she was asking us what sort of things went on for us with Cartoon de Salvo. What did we want more of and less of? Well, we're a project-funded theatre company, which means that we have no money for core costs. And, you know, it's really hard, basically. We always pay actors and directors and creative teams a little bit more than union rates. But we've never had any funding for the artistic director. So over 17 years, my job, the time I'd given to Cartoon de Salvo, was effectively made me the company's biggest funder. So that wasn't so good. We'd pay producers to run projects, but in between, everything would fall to me or fall apart. So the room that we were in with Liz, for example, we'd blagged it for free. And it turned out not just about money. And I was about to find out that that was a really important part of it. It was not just about money. So there I was, harping on like a broken record, the same old story about what's difficult about Cartoon de Salvo. And Liz stopped me and said, okay, Alex, what if I said to you, from this moment onwards, you are no longer the de facto administrator of Cartoon de Salvo? That's Cartoon de Salvo. Well, that moment was so striking to me that I burst immediately into tears. What was that about? Well, she'd heard me. So for this thing that I'd brought up in the theatre company for, every single company meeting, every single board meeting had finally been heard. And now it was going to change. And all that I had to do was accept that it was going to change. So, you know when there's like white noise in a room, like coming from a fridge or a machine or something like that, and someone comes in and they turn it off, you know, that you get that amazing sort of sense of clarity and lightness. It was exactly like that. 2 days later, it all felt like a really weird dream, like an indulgence. So I emailed Liz to say it wasn't going to happen, this couldn't possibly work, you know, for so many different reasons. All the things that we came out with in the rest of the meeting about restructuring the company and finding more time for my independent career, well, it couldn't possibly happen, you know, for all these different reasons. But that was just a blip. That was part of the story. I was, in story terms, refusing the call to adventure. And all heroes and heroines must do this. Did you get a glass of water? So this moment kick-started for me a year of change. It allowed me to completely reimagine my whole world. So I shared the artistic directorship with the two other guys in the company, with Neil Haig and Brian Logan. And by giving away 2/3 of the leadership, I found I gained more power. And it even allowed me to completely reimagine my artistic practice. So I'm an improviser, yeah, as you can probably tell. I'm a deviser, but yes, just a month after this meeting that I had with Liz, suddenly I'm a writer. I got a commission from National Theatre Wales. And then I started doing all these really crazy things, like I sent some of this writing off to the Royal Court, and then I got on to the Royal Court Writers' Programme, and all this stuff just kept happening. It was so exciting. And I guess the point of all this is if someone listens to you, if someone hears you, well, I can't tell you how empowering that is in terms of being able to imagine that things can change and that you can take the lead in your own life. So, yeah, I began to sort of connect this stuff up with feminism, yeah? I've been working as an actor on a project called Permission Improbable with a theatre company called Improbable, and it was exploring why there aren't any women in impro. I don't know if you know that, but there's hardly any women in improvisation. It's a very blokey territory. And I improvise with two, you know, really nice, enlightened male improvisers. Read The Guardian, you know, they're really nice people. But, you know, stuff goes on. So what we do in my theatre company, we did it here once in this room. We make up a whole story in one night. So we don't do sketch-based whose line stuff. We make up a whole story. And, yeah, well, this is typical of what happens, right? So I'll come on in the first scene. And I'll go, oh, hello, I seem to be the hero in this story. Tonight, it's all about me. And then we'll do the second scene. And then in the second scene, the hero arrives, and I'm endowed as his girlfriend. So there's that. But, yeah, so in Permission Improbable, what we were doing is we were trying to explore how can we let the girl improvisers come forward and go, can I have this story? Tonight, can this be my turn? And a lot of that work was sort of internal because, yeah, there's not much an enlightened, Guardian-reading, kindly male improviser can do to help you if your interior monologue has a default setting of, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, I'll get found out. So we had to work on the inside. And really, you just need to get heard. So, yeah, I started talking to Improbable about a project I'm cooking up, and it's called Birdhouse. And it's not a show, it's a sort of practical thing, it's a support framework. And it's to help, well, it's sort of inspired by Permission Improbable and that thing about the permission and entitlement with women and that sort of small, big stuff. But it's also about leadership in the arts, and it's specifically for independent theatre makers. And it's inspired by Liz, the coach who helped me to imagine how things could change. So what I did is I got some money from the Arts Council and I called a meeting with Improbable Theatre and it was called The Independents. How do we support the women making new theatre? And we did this in open space. Do come in and sit down, it's only me. No problem. I need a drink of water. So we did this in open space. Now, open space is a thing that Improbable Theatre introduced to the theatre community, and I think it works. I think it happens in business quite a lot. I don't know if you know of it, but it's a way of having a really democratic conversation. So in open space, basically everyone's encouraged to take the responsibility for raising an issue, something that's on their mind. And anybody can hold a topic on whatever they want, if they want to. And you can't really leave an open space session saying they didn't talk about my issue, because you had the chance. So this is what I noticed. It was the end of the day, and I'd called a session called What is Birdhouse? And it was very crowded. And yeah, there was a lot of people who were new to open space who were just realising, oh yeah, all right, it's true, so everyone can actually get heard here. So people started to pipe up who hadn't spoken up yet, the reticent people, and now it was quite deafening. Yeah, and so partly to shape the conversation, and partly to stop it being a moaning shop, I said, all right, so what can you do? What can you bring to Birdhouse? What would you trade for the opportunity to do some work on yourself, on your leadership, and on your practice? Yeah. And this is just a small handful of the things that the women came up with. So, because I wrote down loads, but okay. I know about personal finance and fundraising. I'm a voice coach, advertising, PR and social media. I know how to create safe collaborative environments. I teach laughter yoga. I'm just an actor. I bake great cakes and I'm a development manager. All these talents, stepping forward, I can do this. This is something I can do that not many people know about me. And it was really wonderful. The volume raising in the room of these women taking up the space. And I remember that volume thing distinctly because I had a profound headache afterwards, which I had to address with a large white wine. Or two. And so since then, Birdhouse has begun. We've done sessions on active listening, on coaching, on goal setting, how to have difficult conversations, all the sort of stuff that would be in the continuing professional development itinerary of someone working for a large funded organisation but is entirely inaccessible to independent freelance theatre makers. It's not got a specific feminist agenda as such, but when that stuff comes up about permission and entitlement and so on, we just notice it. Yeah, it's kind of nice to do this stuff without the guys in the room, but you're also welcome here, so that feels a bit of an awful thing to say. Someone described it as a sisterhood. And there'll be sub-tribes within it, yeah? So my friend Matilda Lisa is setting up a thing that it supports women who work in the theatre who have children, or who want to have children, or who can't have children, and also those who don't want to have children. Support them all to continue making theatre. And one of the things I love most about Birdhouse, and something that might actually make it sustainable, is everyone's encouraged to share something for 20 minutes that they're really good at. So we've had sessions on personal finance, or creative writing, or entrepreneurship. And it's really lovely when the people ask questions and then the women realise that the thing that they're really good at is really, really valuable to someone else. And it's also really, really special when women realise that the change that they could make is within themselves. It's possible and they can do it, but it starts within. And that's where it has to start. So this is just a thing that I've done. Oh, this slide is a woman who taught us how to juggle tangerines. So this is a thing that I've done in my theatre-making community. I don't know if this could possibly resonate. I'd be interested to know if this resonates with your world or your work or your life. If it's something that maybe you've held on to a belief that is stopping you imagine how to change. Maybe you've been in a culture that's negative for you, and maybe you supported it somehow, and now it's endemic. I just want to pass on to you that you can walk away from that, or you can share it, give it away, or either way, you can create the change, and the answer is just to get yourself heard. Thank you. Okay, thanks very much. Cheers. I'm now going to pass you on to our next speaker, who's Christine Atkinson. Christine has led the Women's Entrepreneurship Hub since 2008. Currently, she's managing the Women Adding Value to the Economy Convergent project, tackling gender pay and gender inequalities. She's got extensive experience as a woman entrepreneur, running highly successful companies, specialising in inequalities and gender issues. So I'll hand you over to Christine. Thank you.
Hi everybody, can you hear me? Yeah? I'm going to follow the lead of Alex and make sure I've got water there, so I apologise for my throat at the moment. Tonight, I'm going to do things slightly different to what I usually do, in that my day job is a lecturer in a university, and as you've already heard, I'm seconded out to a project at the moment. But what I wanted to do was to talk a bit about women in self-employment and women entrepreneurs, and particularly the sorts of things that confront them in their journey in that direction. And to do that, I thought I'd share with you my story as a woman entrepreneur and try and pull out some of the things that I think are common areas and perhaps some of the things that are just purely quirky about me. So I'll then mention a little bit about the project that I'm currently working on, because hopefully that might be interesting and inspire some change in itself. So what you can see in front of you is my lifeline, with all sorts of highs and lows, thrills and spills. And all of us have this kind of thing, the pattern of our lives, I think. Very few people just go along on an even keel. And wouldn't life be boring if it was like that? I won't talk about the whole thing because it would bore you to death and we'd be here all night. So I thought I'd just pick out a few things that might be relevant to the topic I've set for myself. When we talk about entrepreneurship from an academic point of view, there are a number of debates that we tend to focus on, and one of them is, are entrepreneurs born or made? There's a similar debate in relation to management and in relation to leadership. I think at the moment the current thinking is that it's a very complex picture, and there are a number of things that influence people to think about being self-employed or to start a life as an entrepreneur. Some of these things are antecedent influences, such as education, gender, ethnicity, family, and so on. And so my starting point really is the very strong women role models that there were in my family when I was a child. My mother was a community midwife, my aunt was a district nurse, and I grew up seeing my mum and my aunt doing all their admin work and working out their mileage and things like that on the dining room table. I'd then see them go out to do very responsible jobs and to work unsociable hours and to work really hard. So I had working women in the family, and I got used to seeing them going out to work and seeing some of the impacts of that. But at the same time, in my family, there were also very strong role models who were in business. My grandmother, my aunts, and my uncle, occasionally helped by my dad when things got really busy, ran a family business, which was originally a farm, and then my grandfather died, and it became a milk distribution business. Or as you and I might say, they became milk ben and milk women. One of my earliest memories is being with my aunt on a day when my mum was working and there was nobody to look after me. And we were counting the takings on my grandmother's dining room table, and I was putting piles of money together across the table. My grandmother had been widowed quite young. She'd brought up 7 children single-handedly. She'd run the farm, and now she'd started a business, and actually went through the rest of her life as the head of this family business. At the time, and for 2 or 3 decades later, I had no idea at all that that might be significant to me in my future and what I would go on to do, and how that might influence me to think about other women and what they might want to do. Anyway, everything changed when I was about 10 years old, because my mother contracted a virulent flu, form of flu, survived, but was left in very poor health that dogged her for the rest of her life. And so while still at school, I became her main carer. My dad was around. He had a job. He was out of the house from 7 in the morning till 7 at night, so it was not much use relying upon him. And at the time, men really didn't take much of a role in that sort of thing anyway. He was the breadwinner. He went out and he did his job. So I learned about very, very womanly traditional things like cooking and ironing and cleaning, but I also learned how to budget, and I learned how to shop, and I learned how to prioritize, and I learned how to deal with time and a lot of stress. So time and stress management. And I think in retrospect, it wasn't a bad education for someone with an enterprising future. So as I say, all of this made sense much later. And at the time, I didn't even think about it. I thought all kids went home and looked after their mum, so it was nothing new. Looking at the sort of next little chapter in my life, my mother got stronger and eventually returned to work. I got good O-levels, good A-levels, and I got my first choice of university in London. Fabulous, wonderful. I had a great first year, but my mum's health started to dip up and down again a little bit. But I completed the first year of the degree, and I had the opportunity to go down early and take a job as a castle guide in France, which is a completely other story, which I'll keep for another occasion. Enormous fun, as you can imagine. But I think if you look at what makes entrepreneurs, what makes people entrepreneurial and go into self-employment, the research tells us about a number of characteristics that are important. So need for independence, need for achievement, an internal locus of control, the ability to live with uncertainty and take risks, being opportunistic, self-confident, proactive, self-motivated, and an ability to live with uncertainty. And I was developing these later characteristics. So things were going really well when suddenly disaster struck again. My mother became really ill, the same thing, just a recurrence of it. I had to return from France as she would need somebody to care for her full-time for a while. And so I also left university and went back to live at home again. I didn't need to be in the house all of the time, so I managed to get myself blagged, I think, a place for myself on a course in a nearby college that was only about a 10 or 15-minute walk away, so I could nip home in break times and at lunchtime and things like that. Completed the course, and then really started to move on again. So from the age of 21, well, around 21, 30-ish, my mother improved, and I started doing a part-time course, a degree course this time, in a local higher education institution, and started developing my career. So I was a bit late. I'd had a little bit of a hesitation there. But I managed to get on with that. I moved away from home, progressed in my career, got married, and I began to specialise in working with women in relation to education, training, employment and enterprise, and was eventually seconded to manage a 5-year project for the then Employment Service, the training agency, which was a national project advising in those sort of areas where I developed an expertise. During this time, while I was developing my career, I had the benefit of really strong women role models around me, superb women who were experts in their field and who were very interested in feminism and supporting other women, including me. Their help was invaluable, and I also had a lot of informal mentoring from them and from some of the men who were my line managers, who challenged me, sometimes completely out of my comfort zone, and encouraged me to aim higher and do more. So looking at what was going on now, I can see that I was accumulating know-how or human capital, know-who or social capital, reputation and credibility, so symbolic capital, all again useful for the latent entrepreneur. So moving on through my journey, we talk now about there being 2 types of entrepreneurship. Those kinds of entrepreneurs that are motivated by push factors or who don't have another choice, and those who are motivated by pull factors, so who are drawn into entrepreneurship to pursue an opportunity or because they think they can do something differently. Often for women, they see an opportunity to do something in a way that would be better for a client base. So for me, things were going well again, when there was a shift in policy, a shift in funding, and the secondment came to an end. So, like so many other people, I was in a position where I could be made redundant, or I could go back to my job that I'd been doing 5 years earlier. I thought, I don't want to do that. That sounded really boring. And so, with one of my team, I took the opportunity to set up my first business. So we spotted an opportunity, and we exploited it. And research tells us that opportunity-based businesses tend to be those that are more financially successful. During the first year, that didn't really feel the case because we made a spectacular loss, and there were occasions when we paid the photocopier leasing agreement and didn't pay ourselves a penny, so it was quite tough. But we had projected that, and we did know it was going to happen. We were completely work-obsessed. We worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. And we had a suite of officers and 15 staff and repeat year-long contracts within 2 years. So it did pay off. So we were doing really well. However, like so many other people, I found during this time things changed in my personal life. My husband relocated here to South Wales for career progression, and for 5 years we did a round-trip commute at a weekend, alternating between the two of us, a round trip of 630 miles, which wasn't really brilliant, but I didn't want to give up my business at that time. Anyway, we got to a point where we wanted to start a family, and so following a traditional pattern, I gradually eased out of my business, and as people started, I eased out of my business, and I relocated down here, and we started again. While men are almost twice as likely as women to say that one of the reasons they go into business is to make more money, women are nearly 5 times more likely to mention family reasons, and 1/5 of women choose to work as self-employed to combine family commitments, working from home, and having flexible employment. So in that, I was no different from many other women. I started my new business, I set it up from home, and I had all of the problems that we know about of establishing credibility, trying to separate out the issues of home and work, trying to deal very soon after that with another problem where my father became terminally ill with cancer, and I found out I was pregnant. So the good and the bad coming together at the same time. Very quickly, in the next section, I had a new baby and an early stage business to manage. And at that point, I had some really important decisions to make. Research tells us that after 5 years of trading, the average or median drawings of entrepreneurs are £12,440, with profits of just over £10,000. They also researched and found that over half the difference between the earnings among entrepreneurs can be attributed to their household role, with women typically earning less. So it's not a great step to imagine that that's largely around the majority of women taking key responsibility for children and for household tasks. And then there's a negative impact on business performance. So for me, I decided if I was going to continue to be in business, I needed to make some changes and to make sure that my hourly rate was going to cover the increased costs I had for childcare, and that the reward of any time spent in working on my business compensated for being away from my little girl. So I put up my rates, focused on increased and better work, and now I guess I would say that I'd started to focus more on being opportunity-centred than necessity-centred. So I didn't want any work. I wanted work that was good and well worth paying. And still things didn't go smoothly because, unfortunately, we were flooded and I had a home office, so we lost everything. Just the house, it was the office as well, so everything went. I thought I'd mention that particularly at the moment, given the horrendous situation that so many people in the UK are in right now, where they're flooded and have been for weeks and weeks, and how awful it all is. And I feel for them. But mine's a very positive story. There's a really nice outcome from it, so I'm hoping that there's a similar outcome for them too. So the house was repaired, we started again, and from a business perspective, unexpected things helped enormously. Having to keep going was one of those. I didn't want to let my business clients down. And then also my clients had faith that I would actually deliver, and they kept contracting with me, even though for 9 months we were living in a variety of holiday homes and I had a very dodgy mobile telephone signal at times. I also had an accountant who told me everything would be fine because he had just completed a course in disaster management, so not to worry. So I think my journey has shown the importance of staying positive. It's shown some of the highs and lows, the peaks and troughs, the thrills and spills that women encounter when they're going into entrepreneurship. And some of that's informed very much the way in which my work now goes in the University of South Wales, in the Women's Entrepreneurship Hub, and in respect of our Women Adding Value to the Economy, our WAVE project. So, oops, I've gone too far, I do beg your pardon. Will the remote work? No, right hand? No. Have I gone too far forward? Oh. Where's mine gone? Oh my goodness. Sorry.
That's okay.
I shall just talk quickly then. So anyway, some of these incidents along my journey then in that case have influenced the way in which my thinking and that of my team, this is the one, that's it, the one before that. Brilliant, thank you. Have influenced the way in which we've taken things forward. So in terms of the support that we are undertaking for women entrepreneurs, in the beginning, I was involved in some research at the University then of Glamorgan, where we were looking at the business and support, the personal and business support needs of women entrepreneurs in industrial South Wales. And so my own experience came to the fore. There were lots of useful things there, but also it gave us a research context to see what other people's issues had been as well. I also kept my businesses going at this point, which then did get to a point where I had to change things because, like everyone else, I started to think about work-life balance and flexibility. I helped to work on a pioneering master's program in female entrepreneurship for a 6-year period. And then by 2008 was able to set up the Women's Entrepreneurship Hub to give a real focal point to research, policy and practice around female entrepreneurship. From there, we were able to access some European funding, and we ran a project which was called Women's Entrepreneurship in the European Union, or WEU, where we started to research and develop innovative new approaches around women's learning, entrepreneurial learning, and our teaching. And we worked with 7 partners in the UK, Paris, and in Kaunas in Lithuania. So some very interesting work comparing differences and similarities between developed countries and those that were emerging through. We also worked with the Lithuanian Foreign Ministry, Vilnius University and the University of the Caucasus to develop the first women's entrepreneurship project in the Republic of Georgia, using a model that had been developed in my own business some time earlier called Confident in Business. And so it was at this point when I had to make a decision because my career in the university was growing and my businesses were growing, so it was time really to start to think which way to go. And so, reluctantly in some ways, but excitedly in other ways, I decided to take a full-time career at the university, so wound my businesses down. And currently, we are the lead partner in Women Adding Value to the Economy, where we're trying to tackle the underlying causes of gender pay disparities in Wales. And one element of that is trying to encourage women in self-employment and entrepreneurship, create a context whereby some of the barriers that people like me encounter are dismantled. And to do that, we're helping to develop business networks, mentoring scheme, and we're running some educational programs to help people be forewarned and therefore forearmed. So basically, that's my story and some of the barriers that I'd encountered and perhaps some of the ways I'd overcome them and some of the ways in which we're trying to incorporate into our work strategies that will enable us to work with other women and help them through these sort of situations too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. I really enjoyed your list of entrepreneurship skills and how you developed them and hearing your family story and how we can be role models at a really early stage to all the things that you've achieved. So next we're going to hear from Joy Kent, and she took up the position of Chief Exec of Quariteg in January 2013. Did I pronounce that okay? She's a wealth of experience working in public and private sector, representing those most vulnerable in our communities. And before settling in Wales, she taught and managed private language schools in Spain, Czech Republic, and Brazil and Egypt. So I'll hand you over to Joy Kent.
Okay. Yay. There's only one, so that solves that concern. Happy International Women's Day. If I can do that without messing anything up. Great. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to come today. And it's been brilliant hearing your stories too, and definitely things that both of you have said already are resonating with me. And I'm thinking I want to follow up on that, and there's stuff I want to follow up with you as well. Like Christine, I just wanted to sort of take you through a personal story, really. Not because I think that I'm exceptional or there's anything amazing in what I want to share with you, or because I think you should go away and replicate anything that I'm about to say. But just because I want to share the stuff that I've learnt about me and what I've taken forward from my early days as well. I heard something on the, I think I got it from YouTube or somewhere, where it said that the biggest thing that you could learn was to know yourself, be yourself, and look after yourself. And that kind of really resonated with me. And I think that first one about know yourself is really important. So I think I've probably put quite a bit of time into trying to work out who the hell I am and how I got to be who I am. So it's International Women's Day. For Cardiff, that means it's been International Women's Fortnight. We've been at loads of different events over the last few weeks, and there's more coming up as well, which is great. And as you can see from that slide, Cardiff is all about creating a Wales where women achieve and prosper. And I feel like I've probably got the best job in the world because I love what I do and I really believe in what we're trying to achieve as a charity. And I'm not sharing that to sort of gloat with you to say I got the best job, but because I think it's really important that you get to do stuff that you love, because I think when you love doing something, it's not work anymore. And I think that's what we really want for women in Wales, is for them to be doing stuff that they really love, because that does not make life easy. So bits of my story, and I also heard something recently that sort of said memory is just stories that you tell yourself about the past. And I realised when I've been going around sort of telling people about things that it comes out different every single time. So there is an element of this is my version of my past at this moment in time. Come from a very working class background. My dad did various driving jobs, milkman was one of them, coach driver, crane driver, a hearse driver at one point. And my mum did sort of auxiliary nursing and that kind of stuff. But both of them were sort of, I came along very late in life for them. In 1965, I'm 50 next year, and I keep on saying it because I'm trying to get used to the idea, because I never thought that would happen. In 1965, when I came along, I was a bit of a shock, because my mother was 41, and in 1965, that was quite old to be having kids, so I was a bit of a surprise. The doctors told her I was a cyst for quite a while. So hopefully I was a pleasant surprise. But my parents were brilliant people, but they weren't particularly strong. They weren't very well physically quite often, and both mentally as well. They'd had tough lives, the pair of them. They were brilliant people, but they weren't sort of very healthy. I think partly because they kind of, both started smoking when they were 14. They'd had tough times, and they seemed to live on things like dripping and sugar sandwiches and things like that. So not particularly healthy, and it ended up that they were in and out of hospital a lot. And my dad died when I was 11, and my mum died when I was 17. And from 11 to 17, I was kind of main carer for my mum. There were two things that happened when I was 11. One, my father dying, and the other, failing my 11 plus, which meant that it's a real surprise to me still, and I'm very grateful that I'm the chief exec of a charity, because at that point in time, that didn't look like that was going to be the way things were going to turn out. When I failed my 11 plus, that meant that I went to a really rubbish school. And I know that's not everybody's experience, but it was mine. And at that school, girls did, we learned cooking and sewing, childcare, typing. That's the only thing I took from my education. I can touch type, and that proved to be really, really useful. But that was the only thing. And the boys did woodwork and metalwork and growing things. And the plan was that the boys would go into factories, and the girls' highest aspiration was to be a typist. That was the aspiration. The expectation was much lower than that. The aspiration was factory and typing. And it was only the fact that the recession kind of hit in my... I haven't got kids, so I don't do this year 11 malarkey. When we were 14, 15, in our fourth, fifth year, that was the recession. There was a big recession. And suddenly they started talking about us going to college. And it was the first time that I'd ever been mentioned. And I honestly remember thinking, but we're too stupid to go to college. That's what the grammar school kids do. We don't go to college. We don't go into, anyway, so my mum died, like I said, when I was 17. I kind of went on to a YTS scheme. But I was kind of, I remember sort of thinking that there's got to be more to life than this. These aspirations were very, very narrow. They really, there wasn't going to be much excitement, it seemed to me. And it's funny how life kind of just, there's like twists of fate. And I'm always kind of suspicious of people who stand up and go, I'm a self-made woman, I'm self-made, I came from the gutter and I did this, and it's all down to how amazing I am. I don't kind of believe that. I never kind of fall for that. There were things that happened, and my life could have turned out very, very differently in other ways. But meeting some girls who went to the grammar school, that was, and these women will never know that they had a huge impact on me, because I met these girls that went to grammar, and they had bigger vocabularies, they had posher voices, they had nicer clothes. We were living on benefits when, after my dad died. And I just remember thinking, yeah, okay, they've got all that, but they just didn't seem that different in other ways, and they definitely didn't seem that much smarter. I just couldn't see it. I couldn't see why their lives, they were talking about university and this, that, and the other, and it just seemed so different, and I couldn't really get it. So they had a really big influence on me sort of rethinking what might happen. And then I discovered that actually, when you study something that you love, everything sort of is different, and suddenly education, which hadn't been a top priority as a carer, wasn't a big priority in my life. But then I discovered sociology, and everybody sort of like jokes about sociology, but I loved sociology, and I discovered Marxism, and I loved Marxism as well. And that kind of changed everything, because then I was doing stuff that I really enjoyed, and suddenly studying seemed like there was a point in it, and it was enjoyable. So that taught me, do what you love. And I ended up going to university, and things took a different turn. When my mum died, when I was 17, I did go off the rails a bit, and I always say to people, if we'd had Asbos then, I probably would have had one, but thankfully we didn't. And I was kind of, although I didn't realise it at the time, I was kind of homeless as well. I thought I was sort of staying with friends, but that's sofa surfing, I now realise, and I was kind of homeless, but just didn't see it that way. But anyway, university changed everything, went on, sort of lived abroad, came back, did a master's, and things have worked out really, really well, just by twists of fate, really, and random things. So, what have I learnt along the way that may be sort of work for other people, but also may well not? One of the things that having ill parents did, my mother had been told, that she'd lived sort of 7 or odd years longer than anybody anticipated. But it kind of meant that you kind of live for the day. People know people who've had serious illnesses and have been looking at sort of, what that means and whether they're still going to be there. It kind of puts a different perspective on life. And that was a really important lesson, because it made me, I've had to sort of, I suppose I'm quite hedonistic. I have to try, if I'm having a bad day, I think, right, that's it, I don't want to do this anymore. But she did teach me live for the day. Don't do stuff that you don't enjoy. So I didn't have that kind of upbringing, I think, that a lot of people have, where it's like, no, you have to get on with this. You hate it, but you just have to do it. I didn't have that. I didn't really go to school much from the third year onwards, which I don't regret, because I spent a lot of time with my mum. And the school was rubbish, so it wouldn't have taught me anything had I stayed. So I learnt, you know, there's bigger stuff that's important, you know, and focusing on that, and do what you enjoy doing, because life's short, and it's too short to waste it doing stuff that you don't like, within reason. Some things. Take chances and make mistakes. I think, again, because of that upbringing, and because my mum, like I said, she wasn't kind of like the most stable person, but she was amazing, and she was very eccentric. And it was quite a chaotic kind of upbringing, but that was really useful, because I meet a lot of people now who've had a much more stable upbringing and much more, you know, rooted and all the rest of it, and they really have difficulty sort of taking chances or taking risks, or when things change, dealing with things changing. Whereas still today, I'm quite happy with things changing up to 5 minutes before. It's not a problem. And actually, my family's still a bit sort of like that. So I don't really take any notice of anything until it's 5 minutes before, because it could change. So there's no point in sort of, you know, engaging in that plan, because chances are it's going to change anyway. So taking chances and being able to deal with uncertainty is kind of where I prefer to be. Another one, and I've included this because it's kind of the opposite of what people normally say. A lot of people say, you know, plan. I'm not really very good at planning. And I find, like, for example, when the invite came to do this, I was looking through the other people's biographies, and it was just freaking me out, because everybody seemed really amazing. And so I thought, no, I'm just going to ignore that. so another thing that I do, which nobody kind of advises, so I'm not kind of advising it in a way, because it might be a really bad thing, but I find that ignorance actually works for me. I've taken a lot of chances and done things, and afterwards people said, oh, that was really brave. So like my last job, it was a new organisation. We started it, me and, you know, first director of it, an office with a phone on the floor, and I gave up like a decent job to sort of do this. And afterwards people were saying, oh, congratulations, I hear you've gone for that. Yeah, that's great. That's brave. And I was thinking, oh my God, was it? I just didn't occur to me. So I actually think there's something in ignorance, because if you overthink it and you think about all what the negatives might be and the bad things that might happen, I think that stops you doing stuff. So actually ignorance works for me sometimes. The other thing that my upbringing taught me was that people are just people. So when I was in hospitals, kind of like, if my mum had been ill, and I'd go to the hospital and I'd sort of be talking to the doctors, talking to the nurses, kind of advocating on her behalf kind of stuff. I think it gave me, I think it gave me that thing that, like, I'm not really impressed by hierarchy. I'm not really, I'm not afraid of people who are, so they've got this title or this profession or this, and I'm not very, I'm not respectful, but it doesn't scare me, yeah? And I think that has been really helpful. I think it's been really helpful to just think, well, they're just people. And I only notice that sometimes when I'm talking to other people and they're like, oh, but that's the minister for such and such, or that's the chief. I can't be asked with that, to be honest. I just don't get it. I just think, well, just a couple more. Some people sort of say, like, they kind of put on this, you have to put on this front, and you have to become somebody else, and you have to kind of pretend to be somebody. And I do think there's something in that sort of fake it till you feel it. I think there is something definitely in that. But I think, I'm nearly 50, and those negative voices internally are still there, sort of saying sort of stuff like, you're not going to be able to do this, or you're not very good at that, and whatever. And there are still people outside who sort of like would love to give you negative feedback. I think now I just kind of accept that they exist, internally and externally, and I just choose to ignore them. So it's not that I'm going to stop, I don't think those the imposter syndrome and all that, I don't think that's ever going to go away. I think that's still going to be there in your psyche. And I think sometimes it's not necessarily a bad thing, because it kind of helps you keep your feet on the ground, but I just choose to ignore them. And I think the biggest thing that my mother taught me, my earliest memory, my mother, like I said, she was an amazing woman. She actually started when I was 4. My earliest memory, she bought this, I don't know how, she bought this big sort of Victorian house, and she decided to run a boarding house with a 4-year-old girl. She then got involved with the probation service. So my earliest memory is living in a house with 12 men who'd come out of prison. My mother, health and safety, you can just see the risk assessments now. And it was fabulous. I had the best time ever. But what it's kind of really taught me, and my work with sort of people at different charities over the time, is that we see people at a moment in time, but we forget that that's a moment in time. And we don't know what came before, and we're not looking at the future potential of that person. I know if you met the 17-year-old me, you probably wouldn't like me very much. But I'm not a bad person, and that 17-year-old is not who I am now. And my mother taught me that people deserve a second chance, and who you are now doesn't necessarily have to define who you are tomorrow. And what I want to finish on is, a lot of women in positions like chief exec or director or whatever, politicians, whatever, will go around going, oh my God, my life is so I'm juggling this, and it's so stressful, and I'm so important to this. Oh, this is the best it's ever been. This is easier, so much easier than when I was an administrator on £37.50 a week, with no control over my life, with no say in what was happening, doing work that was really tedious and gave me no sense of self-worth. This is being a chief exec of a charity, doing something I love. Yeah, okay, I work a lot of hours, but then so do a lot of other people. I've got people in my family who are still working 60 hours a week on minimum wage. I'm really lucky. So we need more women to be in these positions. As women who have been lucky enough to get into these positions, we need to be saying, this isn't hard, this is great, this is really good, and this is the best for me that it's ever been. So I hope some of that resonates or is of interest. Final plug for the organisation. Please become a friend of Quariteg. It's absolutely free, and it means that you can just sign up online on our website, and you'll just find out what we're up to. And it means that you can be part of our vision and our groundswell. It's been fantastic over the last few days with International Women's Day about there are so many women out there and so many men out there who really want to see a different society. And I want Quariteg to be that organisation that brings us all together and changes things and really makes a difference, because it's about time we did. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. That was wonderful. Really, really inspiring. I really loved what you said about knowing yourself and looking after yourself and being yourself and doing what you love. Fabulous. And then when it comes to impressive biographies, I'm going to move on to Uzo Iwebi, who's originally from Nigeria and qualified as a solicitor and a barrister, and was called to the Nigerian bar. And after she moved to Wales, she worked as a lecturer in law at Swansea Law School, and since founded the very first African community centre in Wales, with branches throughout the country. She served with the Commission for Racial Equality as a commissioner, and she received an OBE in recognition for her services to community relations in South Wales. She's currently the Chief Exec of Race Council Cymru, which is a strategic overarching body which champions race equality, integration and racial justice in Wales. So I'm going to hand you over. I'm very excited to present to you, Uzo.
Thank you so much. I don't even know where to start. I want to say croeso, shwmae, shwdach chi. I'm learning Welsh in Wales. Hannah is my tutor. Yeah, from here. It's such a joy to be here today and to have an opportunity to share what little experience I have, I am bowled over by these women. I just sat there thinking, it's like you could see echoes of your life and your journey in what they're sharing. I was so inspired, and a bit like what Joyce said, you can actually, it's almost as if, even though we've grown up differently and in different families, you can see similarities in the experiences. I've been introduced. I was born in Nigeria. I was one of 5 children, the last but one, bottom of the pile. My dad had 5 siblings, and his mother and father died when he was 11. And my dad, if you know the Nigerian context, there's no income support, there is no government support, you're totally broke. And his father was quite a wealthy man, but as soon as he died, all the lands were pilfered by uncles, and they were cast out. They had to live in the bush, and he had these 5 siblings that were looking up to him. No mom, no dad. But he was a very, very strong Catholic, and he was going to the village church. And there was the Irish priests who were missionaries were sent to Nigeria. And one of them invited him to serve as a mass, a mass server in the church. And he was so diligent at what he did that this priest said to my father, "Do you want to come and live with me? Do my domestic work, and I'll pay for you to go to school." Oh, my father jumped at the chance, because it meant he could earn money, feed the 5 siblings that he had, and then have the opportunity to go to school. And essentially, that was the beginning of what would form his mantra in life, was to contribute to the local community in which he was born. My father was incredibly bright. Even though he came from a lot of tragedy in his personal life, he never had a B in his life. He had A's all through. And through the benevolence of this priest, he sat the scholarship exam that Nigeria ran in those days to do, and he was successful. So the government paid for him to study in any American university of his choice, any subject of his choice, and he thought he'd do something on agriculture because he was interested in the riches of the soil, and he wanted to contribute to our local economy and to understand how to manipulate the heat that we have in Nigeria. He studied in the University of Riverside, California, and it was interesting because he challenged the people around him. He created so many new things. He won all these international awards, and met my mother, who also came from a very poor background. They didn't believe in educating women, so their similarities somewhat in terms of the challenges and barriers that women faced. But her parents wanted her to go to school. They were so poor, they couldn't afford shoes, so she'd walk 4 or 5 miles as a very young child with no shoes and very little clothing to get to school. So my father took her, and immediately her father said to my dad, "You're going to have to take 4 of my children and pay for them as well." So he married one wife and inherited 4 other additional problems that he had to pay for to go to school and develop business. And that was how his journey started. To date, he's developed 35 human beings, either in universities or to start businesses. And it was in that environment he qualified and became, a professor of crop science. And he raised 5 of us. And he always said to us, "Don't start your life disadvantaged." And there was such a big push to be a professional person. He would say to me, because I wasn't incredibly smart in terms of, academic achievement at the time. I thought it was beyond me. I was very bubbly and very extrovert. I didn't see any value in spending too much time studying when I could be having fun and causing riots somewhere. So my dad always said to me, you're going to be left on the shelf if you don't pick yourself up. You know, your sisters are very diligent, your brother's very diligent. They're all professionals, you know. And I'd always wanted to represent people, to speak for people. It was interesting, but I didn't believe I had the intelligence, because in our primary schools, I'd come number 500 and something out of 600 students. And my father would say, you're not coming in this house. The woman who had first position, do they have 10 heads and you have one? Out. So I was caned repeatedly for failing so much. And he always said, that Professor Anyanwu's daughter has had first consistently every year. Does she have 10 heads and God made you with one head? So there was always that pressure to achieve and be good. And he, began to tutor me personally. And he was saying to me, look, all your siblings are flying in school. You need to pick yourself up. It was through all those challenges that I began to look at myself. I remember 4 pieces of advice that both my parents gave to me. Actually, my dad said them. He said, first and foremost, have a faith, have something that inspires you. We in Nigeria, in that part of Nigeria, we're Christians. So he said, I have a strong faith. And the second thing, work extremely hard. Give 100%, and if you fail, you know that you failed on your own back. You've done the best you could. Thirdly, he said, be humble, be modest, and listening to joy. It was about not being overawed when you're in the space with royalty or whatever, because you yourself, you're royalty. Recognize the leader in yourself. Recognize that you're good enough to be who you want to be. And finally, he said, take a step out, take a risk, take a chance. The worst that can happen is they say no. But if you've never ventured, you can never gain. And I think those 4 principles have absolutely blown me away, because having come through childhood playing away most of my opportunities, I never really tried. When I went into university, I began to think, I want to be a lawyer. So if I want to be a lawyer, then I have to study. And my grades began to improve. And when I met the most wonderful human being in the world, and he got married to me, Andrew, he is just the best thing since sliced bread. You know, people who inspire you, who celebrate you, who believe that even when people thought you were a chaotic bag of rubbish, he saw an opportunity and a wonderful human being to cherish and love. And honestly, I don't know where God found Andrew, but if there's reincarnation, I want to find him again. There we go. So he's a mixed heritage, Andrew. His mother's white English, his father's black Nigerian. And it was interesting because his orientation was totally different to mine. And he had a more settled upbringing. He didn't feel the same pressure. He was naturally bright. He was also a law lecturer, and he taught me. So I'll leave you to work all that out. So we got married, and he came over to the Swansea University to lecture in the law school. And I joined him as a barrister, thinking I'm going to walk into a wonderful job. Swansea, I did really well then in school. My degrees were brilliant. I went to the bar, called to Nigerian bar. And if you remember that Nigeria used to be an empire, one of the colonized cities, so our law system is based on the same trust, equity, and common law as the UK. So I could practice by doing a simple transfer test. I thought I'd walk into a job. Went to job center in Swansea. They said, actually, you will not get a job as a black woman in the law profession in this place. I said, what? You joking? No, she said. I'm telling you, you can go and have a look, but there are not many black people here, and nobody's going to want to recruit you. I thought you're joking. I'm so brilliant. I know my stuff. Went everywhere looking for this job. Nothing. Knocked on all the doors. Nothing. One solicitor gave me a chance, interviewed me. I answered all his questions brilliantly. He said, you're a very smart woman, yeah. He said, but do you know what? You have a very strong Nigerian accent. So when you have stayed here for at least 4 years, come back and see me. I said, so you're not giving me this job because of my accent? He said, well, not quite that way, but you need to acclimatize to Wales and understand. I was devastated because as soon as I married Andrew, my father gave me 4 people to put through school. So I didn't even have a job, and I had 4 people that Andrew and I were meant to pay for. We didn't have children or anything. So I needed a job, and they were all waiting. And every time you get a letter, it's from this relative saying, Auntie, I'm waiting to go to school. I wish you all the best. So pressure, pressure, pressure. And I called my father because I walked up and down Swansea. It was a hopeless situation. I went back to the job center, and I said to that lady who spoke to me, I said, you're right, I cannot get a job. I've been going for the 4 or 5 months. I was so low. She said, my advice to you is start from the shop floor and work yourself up to the top. I said, fine. So what kind of shop? She said, you have Hypervalue, you have Argos, you have all these. And she gave me the leaflets, the application form, and I went away, applied. I went to Hypervalue on Swansea High Street, and the lady said to me, I said, oh, I see the advert, can I apply? She said, yes. My friend from Wales said to me, don't tell them you're a barrister, they won't give it to you. So just say GCSE, because then they would say you're not too qualified. So that's what I put down. And the next day I went, I told another Welsh friend, and she said, oh, I'm going to go and apply for that job. Well, within 2 days, she applied for it, she was interviewed, and she got the job. So I went and I said to the lady, I gave you my application form. You said the job was closed, but you took my application form. My friend came and applied 2 days after me, and she's got the job. Can you tell me what I didn't do quite right so that I can put it right? And she said to me, Madam, are you shopping? I said, no. She said, well, leave the store or I'll ask security to escort you. Do you know, people, I came out of Hypervalue on the high street. I was like Eeyore. My shoulders were down. There was no pizzazz. I was crying for Wales. I was so low in my spirit. And I remember calling home. I said to my father, I really want to come home. I think it's a very cold place. I've never heard of racism because in my culture, the white people who lived in Nigeria were very warmly welcomed. It was a shock to me. And my father gave me one piece of advice again. He said, never allow negative people to live in your brain rent-free. I didn't understand it. I said, what? Never allow negative people to live in your brain rent-free, because you will begin to absorb all those negativity. She says, you're a winner. You are a winner, and you're going to come through. So look within yourself. 4 things I've always shared with you. Pray hard, work hard, be modest, be humble, and take that step. Keep going. Something is going to happen. And you wouldn't believe it, my first job was in Toys R Us selling toys, and I did it 100% as if it was to die for. No, I'm running out of time now. And it was interesting because when I served customers, my smile was the biggest. They put me on the most busiest checkout, and I thought it was because they actually, I don't know why, but I thought it always fell to me, and checkout 1, where all the kids screamed for Christmas presents. I had never seen so many toys in my life. I wrote home and said to my parents that one man pulled up a trolley at Christmas and rang out £657.70. And I said, my gosh, how many kids do you have? And he said, oh, that was for Alex, and pulled the next trolley. I nearly fainted. I'd never seen so many toys for anybody in my life, because for Christmas, all you got was your brand new dress for church, a hat if your parents were well off, and a little bag to carry to church. That was it, no gifts. So it was a change in culture. The next job, I had to get 2 jobs because we just couldn't live on my Toys R Us salary. It was £3.20 at the time per hour. And I got my next job, night shift, in Walker's Crisp Factory. How many of you have ever worked there? You need to respect me. It was the toughest job ever. I worked from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. every day. I'd go to sleep, wake up around 10, run to Toys R Us, do the shifts till evening, run home, cook, rush off to bed, then straight to Walker's. That was my life. And I tell you something, you could smell the cheese and onion flavoring from 7 miles before you got in there. And guess again, they used to give me the vat of oil where you put the spices. Don't eat crisps. They used to give me the job of cleaning that vat because no British people wanted to do the job. So there was myself and this Zimbabwean lady, and we'd have to unscrew all those huge vat metal things, clean them all out and scoop. I'm not able to eat Walker's crisps because I know the gunge that is in it. I tell you, but the women had hearts of gold. I met the most inspirational women in my life. They encouraged me. They soon found out I was a lawyer because they thought I talked a lot and I knew a lot about stuff. And they brought their contracts for me to have a look at. One of them snooped and said my grammar was very good. So they said, did you, we've seen that you did a bit of law in your GCSE. I said, yes, something like that, civil, just civil. I didn't want to say too much because I'd be sacked. So they said, oh, can I bring my contract? So there was a queue of women waiting for me to have a look at their contracts to tell them if the agent was cheating them of money. I nearly got sacked, but they chipped in and did some of my packing of crisps while I looked at their contract. It was great. They have inspired me. Those women worked so hard, and we became fast friends. Shortly after, I got my 9 years of lecturing. I got a part-time law lecturing job. We kept the friendship. And it was through some of my experiences I faced blatant racism. I am telling you the truth. And it was through some of those experiences that I actually set up my first business, which was a consultancy called Ffôn, which is of one mind. Because I had a vision to bring white people and black people together and to share some of the challenges I'd faced in my own life. And so I employed about 7 people who were trainers. I said, I don't have money, but I can pay you on a job. When we get a contract, I pay you. So we went around everywhere delivering training on legislation. I did employment law, anti-discrimination legislation. I got a gay lady to talk about being gay. I got a disabled woman talk about being disabled, and I spoke about being black, and I got a Welsh person to speak a bit of Welsh. It was incredible, the synergy between us, and we made a fair bit of money. I did a lot of the work, and a bit like Joy, it was slaving, night after night, writing up these manuals that would go to be, and I went to council meetings and persuaded councillors that I was the best person to hire. I didn't even have a clue what I was saying. So it was all trying to believe in myself and apply those principles of really working hard. I'll tell you something, over the years, I don't want to read through the list, but somebody saw an advert for this commission role and said to me, Uzo, it's got your name on it. You like talking for people, and it's all about race equality and stuff. I thought I'd never get it because the last person who vacated was a judge, and he was the first black judge in Wales. I thought I'd never get it. My friend said, Uzo, just go for it. Andrew said, of course you'll get it. And at the time, I was working for South Wales Police, and I had just taken another chance because there was a job going in the police to write equality policies and guidance nationally for the 43 police forces in the UK. And I wrote that application, didn't think I'd get it, went for an interview. The woman who came out in front of me had a perfect turnout. You know, these beautiful women who looked very efficient. She had her glasses on her nose, blonde hair, tight blonde hair, powerful skirt, wine red. She was all dressed in red, and it was tight as a bond, and she walked out and looked at me. "Oh, you here for the interview?" I said, "Yes." I said, she said, "Where have you come from?" I said, "Wales." "Oh, you came from Wales?" Very posh English accent. I thought, there we go, I'm stuffed. There's no way, I'm never going to get, but something said to me, "Uzo, go for it. The worst they can say is no. But you have come this far." And I went for it. I was so excited about diversity. I knocked the glass of water over their computer, and all the interviewers were like looking, "My goodness, she's wrecked her equipment and stuff." I came out, my husband said, "Hello, darling, how did it go?" I said, "I don't think so." I threw water at my interviewers. Can you imagine? He said, "How did you do that?" So, a bit of chaos. And then they called me and said, "Wow, you've got it." I said, "You're joking." They said it was the passion. It wasn't anything else. It was the passion. And they'd never seen such commitment so much. They were all wet when I left. So we were laughing. So off I went to the Home Office and worked for the Association of Chief Police Officers and 43 police forces. Andrew said, "Uz, let me pinch you. Who is this? My little Uzo, And it was quite interesting. I'm knocking this computer down now. So anyway, off I went. And when I came back, this commission role came. Attended the interview. The ministers were there. And I walked in a bit like Joy. I said, "My father walks into the place of the president of Nigeria, the president of the United States. He doesn't know people. It's all about humanity. We're all people." And I walked in, people from Tony Blair's cabinet were interviewing for the commission. I thought, you're just human. I just acted myself. I didn't think anything of it. And then I had a call from Welsh government and they said, "Oh, Commissioner." I thought, huh? And they said, "The minister wants to speak to you." I said, "Which minister? From which church?" Because I thought it was a minister from the church in Swansea. I go to Pantiguaida Baptist Church. He said, "Not a church, minister from Welsh government." I said, "Who's that?" And he said, "Jane Hott, she wants to speak to you." So I picked the phone. I thought, what's she calling me for? And she said, "Oh, come here." That was the first I knew. I was like, my God, how good are you? This is incredible. So I'll tell you the truth. Working through my life has been incredible. I believe that there is nothing, the sky is the limit. In fact, I believe opportunities for women and men, opportunities for all people from all backgrounds, despite challenges in your background, it is limitless. It can be limitless. The only person that can change the world for you is you. And you got to change mentally. And I say to black people, this man was very wise, Bob Marley, when he said, "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery." And I definitely think that there is a truth in that saying. I just finished. I've taken more than 10 minutes, and our chair is panicking. People inspired me. 3 people, apart from my parents. Martin Luther King Jr., change does not roll in on wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. How true. An individual has not started living until he or she can rise above the narrow confines of their own individualistic concerns to embrace the broader concerns of humanity. And I believe very much that this is what I'm doing. One woman who absolutely gets me, and I get her and I love her so much, is Maya Angelou. And she says, "I've learned that people will forget what you say. They will forget what you've done, but they will never forget how you've made them feel." And that's really powerful, because I do believe that you have the opportunity as a leader in your own right. Even if you're a cleaner here, you are a leader in what you're doing. And I think you can leave imprints of positivity and empowerment on the lives of people around you. So make people feel like they're valued. And finally, Madiba Nelson Mandela, he said, "For to be free is not merely to cast off your chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." There is no passion to be found playing small. In life, settling for a life that is less than the one that you're capable of living. And I personally say to you, who should set the limits but you? Don't let difficulties keep you chained to your past. A bit like what the lady said. We've all had a tough time. I don't have time to tell you mine, but it's been hell. But I am determined to make life not just for me better, but for my children and their children afterwards, and for all of us here. Today, I sit on many boards like the Red Cross. I sit on the Atlantic College, and I do think if you don't venture, you probably won't gain. So let people stop holding you down, and you decide for yourself your future. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Wow. I wanted you to carry on all night, didn't we? We have gone over a bit. But I think one of the things that brings it all together for me is what a naughty bunch of ladies. What risk takers, disobedient, not being held back. So it feels really celebratory, and I feel very worked up about that now. So International Women's Day, yeah. Great, so we've got to have a little break in order to set up for the panel discussion we're having. We're bringing some more people in to and get some questions from you and talk a bit more. So we need to 10 minutes. Do the people need to leave the room? Ffôn? She's popped out. I don't... Yeah. Yeah. See you in a bit.